You're listening to There Ought to Be a Law, the Center for Auto Safety podcast with Executive Director Michael Brooks, Chief Engineer Fred Perkins, and hosted by me, Anthony Simino. For over 50 years, the Center for Auto Safety has worked to make cars safer. I'm not even going to wait
there you go.
for you. Look at this. It's blue shirt day. Oh my God.
We haven't made it. Piggly Wiggly has not made it into a few episodes lately.
Yeah, what are we guys slacking off? It must be summer.
It must be.
The heat dome. It's the heat dome.
I've already hit the record button. People are suffering through this nonsense right now.
I'm sorry so much.
Well, somebody loves us. They must be.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of There Ought to Be a Law, or as the AI transcription software calls it, never mind. This is stupid. Hey, so we record the shows on Wednesdays, and what I've discovered is all the cool car news comes out on Thursdays. It drives me nuts. Every week we do a show, we record it on Wednesday, it comes out Thursday, and then at 7 a.m. Thursday morning, you see all these amazing auto stories. For example, one that came out last Thursday was from The Verge. Waymo issues software and mapping recall after RoboTaxi crashes into a telephone pole. Yeah, Waymo, the self-driving RoboTaxi company that we've said is better than GM Cruise, because, well, I mean, anything's better than GM Cruise, managed to drive into a telephone pole. It's very impressive. So Waymo is issuing a voluntary software recall after one of its driverless vehicles collided with a telephone pole in Phoenix, Arizona last month. The vehicle was damaged, but no passengers or bystanders were hurt in the incident. Waymo goes on and says, "We're safer than humans."
Well, to be fair to Waymo, it was only one telephone pole.
That's true. So...
yeah, they responded pretty quick, right? I mean, we see incidents that are a lot more serious than hitting a telephone pole involving other car manufacturers, autonomous or not. And, frankly, a lot of those times, you'll have a crash, there's a defect involved. The first thing that happens is lawyers get involved. The case may be settled before it even comes to court, and no one ever hears about it. Waymo doesn't exactly have that luxury, since there's so much, coverage of them, and these incidents come to light pretty quick in the media. And they responded, within 2 weeks or so from the incident with a software update and a new map that their vehicles use to run properly, something we suggest Tesla and some other manufacturers probably be using as well. But they're going to get a new software update, a new map update. I don't have to tell owners when that's going to happen, because there are no owners of Waymos other than Waymo. So they're doing some new mapping to fix this. I don't know if this is a problem that has arisen because they're trying to move a little faster than normal, or what's going on here. But fortunately, you won't see, hopefully, any more Waymos hitting telephone poles.
Yeah, we've talked before about software validation. It's not easy, and you need to go back when you make a change to software, especially complex software, where there's a lot of interrelationships among the different parts of the software program. For example, the perception of an AV requires inputs from all of the sensors. It requires interpretation of all of those inputs from all of the sensors. It requires the processing of the data that's coming in from the cameras and conversion of those into virtual images that can be used inside the computer, algorithms, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot to that. And when somebody comes out and makes a change like this, which has got to be fundamental, how in the world can they validate it overnight? I don't understand. I think the only way they can do that is to just run a bunch of simulations and say, well, QED, we're all done here. The video of Fred Perkins wiping his hands. But that's not the right way to do things. And, they need to validate the software using real situations, real vehicles, real sensors, and real images. And I just can't believe that they're doing a thorough job of software validation of an update this critical for a safety critical function essentially overnight, and then saying it's great and we're going to launch it out into the world. This is a very complex and critical process that should not be treated lightly. End of rant.
What I guess I was, what is, instead of, I don't know, what are they supposed to do in this situation, I guess, when they're trying to validate new software to get a recall out? I mean, obviously there's got to be a happy medium somewhere between pure simulation and setting up a master road course full of telephone poles that emulates all the possible telephone poles in America, right? So where's the happy medium there where, I guess consumers and Waymo can feel comfortable with how well they've done a recall?
Well, this is where you get into statistical confidence, right? So you need to have a threshold for statistical confidence to say it's good enough. So what is the threshold? We don't know. It's apparently very low because they don't require a lot of testing to do this. How could they do this? How could they approach it? Well, in a perfect world, what they would do is they would first dive in, understand why this happened, figure out where the margins are on, not just this telephone pole, but what is it about telephone poles and vertical structures that caused this failure to take place. They would then find what the critical parameters were in that analysis, set up a test somewhere where they can take the vehicle, run it through the test, and make sure that not only does it detect this telephone pole, but it also addresses all of the other critical faults that they found, because they will find other critical faults. And then, once they've run that test in many ways, say, running it 100 times so that they can build up a decent amount of statistical confidence, then you put it back on the road and endanger people. If you want to keep it on the track, fine, do a crappy job and just let it run through the track. But when you're putting it out in the public and you're endangering people, you're endangering 3-year-olds crossing the street holding their father's hand, a higher standard must be imposed on these than just, well, it looks okay to me.
Well, this is one of these things, where we've talked about this before, where, okay, Waymo has said, hey, we've done over 7 million miles of real world testing. And in those 7 million miles, as best we can tell, they've never run into a telephone pole before, right? But along that 7 million mile arc, they've replaced software and they've updated software and whatnot. And the things we've talked about in the past is, well, each time they do a software update, they have to revalidate their entire system. And I think this really highlights that, because some software update, or it might have been a hardware update, caused it to now say, hey, let's hit telephone poles, right? Is that right?
Yeah, well, apparently, based on the videos and the reports.
So, and I imagine it's got to be even harder to do the testing if even the telephone poles out on a track in a real world, is because you'd have to recreate the conditions under which it occurred. So what was the angle of the sun? Was that blinding some sensor? Was something happening there? Was there some reflective material on the telephone pole itself that caused a sensor to fail or something like that? The more I think about it, the more complex this becomes.
Well, yeah, that's the correct approach. You're taking it the right way. And so let's say, for example, that it was caused by the angle of the sun glinting off of something. Well, that's okay. So that's good to know. Now you'd say, well, what are the limits on that? How wide can you open this window and still get the same negative result, or the same, opportunity to run into this telephone pole? Was the telephone pole painted green? Well, is it going to run into everything that is painted green? Or is there a juxtaposition between the green and the make up a color, turquoise background of the garage that caused this to happen? It's very complex. And, you can't just throw shit against the wall and say, this sticks, so we're good. Again, people are at risk. Pedestrians are at risk. Motorists are at risk. People who have not agreed to be part of this test regime are now faced with a multi-ton vehicle coming at them at 40 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour, which might run into them or a local telephone pole. It was interesting. Waymo put out a video last week showing Waymo going down the road and how it avoided a car that was coming at them, that was making a left turn from the opposing lane. And the takeaway from that is that Waymo successfully intimidated that other car. And if that other car hadn't stopped, the Waymo would have been in a world of hurt. Um, this is an acceptable approach. This is what they showed in their video. And really what it shows is that other people are having to look out for these damn vehicles. And in order for them to transit a road with very light traffic in full sunlight with no hazardous environmental conditions, this is the best they've got to show. And this is what they put out. There's a big gap here. We talked last week about the bankruptcy of their safety case, and
Right.
we talked about that in detail, and no evidence that that's changed.
It looked like in reading through the submission to NHTSA, it looked like that Waymo is assigning some sort of damage score, they called it, to objects that are detected in the vehicle's path. I'm sure all of us have, seen a paper bag or a aluminum can or plastic bottle or something in the road. It appears that Waymo is, assigning scores to certain objects that are not a threat to the safety of the vehicle or the passengers and ignoring them in some respects. And that looks like, it assigned too low of a damage score to this telephone pole that was, in a somewhat odd place. It was kind of in the road before a curb. So, it was an unusual place for a telephone pole to be. And the vehicle's essentially ignored it, is how it looks like this happened. So that's an interesting part of this. You don't want your vehicle, stopping quickly when it sees a beer can or a trash bag or some other object that's not really a problem. And so that's that's an interesting part of this that I don't think it received a lot of attention.
Waymo has been fairly open about, well, more open than their competitors, we'll say. So if anyone from Waymo is listening, I would love to find out, if you rolled back your software, would that still run into the telephone pole? What was the actual point of failure? Was it a software update? Was it hardware failing? Was it replaced hardware? Anything at all. So, hey, if you work at Waymo, go to autosafety.org, click on donate, because you're getting paid too much, and you got to get a tax write-off. And while you're there, you can click on contact us, send us a little note and be like, hey, I made a mistake. I pushed out the wrong software. My bad.
And that
Don't
is
tell anybody.
contact@autosafety.org. Send your information. It'll be safe with us.
Yes. There you go. And that's our Waymo update for the day. Here's an interesting one from our friends at the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. I didn't expect this. It is an article titled, "Most Drivers Would Be Okay with Anti-Speeding Tech in Vehicles." More than 60% of drivers would find it acceptable if their vehicle provided an audible and visual warning when they exceeded the posted speed limit, a new survey from IISH shows. Perhaps more surprisingly, about half of drivers say they wouldn't mind vehicle technology that makes the accelerator pedal harder to press or automatically restricts speed. So what this survey shows is that you two are wrong and people are not afraid of America and freedoms, because that's the argument you guys have made. This will never happen because of America and freedoms. But this survey is showing that, we're okay with a little restriction if it's going to save lives.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a great study. I'm glad they did it. It's kind of a critical moment to do this research, because the intelligent speed assistance is going to go live in all new vehicles next month in the European Union. And, as we've discussed countless times on this show, we feel that there's a serious need for putting technology in cars that can crack down on speeding. Now, what they found was essentially that, 60% of drivers, generally agreed it'd be acceptable for this stuff to be on every trip, and that went down depending on the technology. So intelligent speed assistance is going to give you audible alerts and warnings when you're speeding. 60% of drivers, overall seem to accept that. However, when you ask them about, well, do they accept restrictions that are based on the accelerator pedal? For instance, you could apply resistance to the accelerator pedal to prevent it from being pushed after speeding is detected, or to give feedback to the driver that you're speeding and you're going to have to push harder on this pedal to go faster. And then I think that the percentage dropped below 50% for the kind of speed technology that I think we most support, which is simply refusing to allow the person to speed, making it so that the car can't exceed speed limits, but to any great extent. And also interesting is that the EU's version of this is, first of all, you're going to be able to turn it off. So if you're a speeder and you don't want to be annoyed and you're in the EU, all you have to do is turn the thing off. I'm not sure if it's every time you get in the car, like you have to do with your auto start button, or if it's, something that you turn off and it's off as long as you leave it for the life of the car. But and also in Europe, if you exceed the speed limit by 1 or 2 miles per hour, that chime is going to start. I think that's something that might not be as acceptable to American drivers. I could see something starting at 5 miles per hour over, something like that might be more acceptable. But ultimately, this is going to happen in America at some point. When it does, I think it's critical that we really look at what's going to be the best way to prevent crashes and fatalities involving speeding. And to us, it is something that literally forces drivers not to speed, because we know, I mean, at least in my experience, people who speed tend to do it fairly habitually and without regard to other people on the road. And I don't think that warnings or buzzers that can be turned off are ever going to stop that category of people.
No, but if my insurance company says, hey, if you put this in your car and you use it, we'll knock off some percentage of your premiums, I'd be all for it. And I think most people would, because my insurance rates are ridiculous. So they do that.
Yeah, and they're not going down anytime soon either, it doesn't appear.
No, especially the way I'm speeding all the time.
Are you paying for a teen driver yet?
No, no. He gets a driver's
I
license.
started that a few years ago. It is not pleasant.
Oh no, if he wants that, he's got to pay for it himself. And the cost of, I mean, being a 19-year-old getting your own insurance in Manhattan, I imagine, is astronomical. Because as an adult,
Oh, yes. This might be a good
astronomical.
time to ask for more donations, Anthony, because you're going to need it.
You just send them directly to me at moneypit.com. Continuing with the speeding subject, there's the Washington Post has an article titled DC Traffic Cameras Have Led to Sharp Decline in Speeding. In 2015, the mayor of DC unveiled a traffic safety initiative called Vision Zero, with the aim of bringing traffic fatalities and injuries to zero. Hey, clever. So they have speed cameras, and stop sign violations are a big part of this. And from the article, soon residents frustrated by reckless driving were demanding more of them. There were nearly 1,200 requests for traffic camera installations last year, according to the District Department of Transportation. To date, the city has installed 477, including 140 since November. So the residents are actually begging for this stuff, because personally, there's a speed camera not too far from me that I dislike, mainly because somebody in my household likes to forget that it's there, and then I get $50 fines every month. And I think I funded enough to repave this goddamn road. So,
But you've complained a lot about that stretch of road and the driving that goes on there. So
well,
I would have thought you would have been in favor of the cameras.
no, because it hasn't changed behavior. Okay, it hasn't changed behavior, and
Well, I think there's a big difference then between your camera and especially the one on Wheeler Road that they cited in DC. I think that when the first month of installation, they had 7,500 citations or so.
wow.
And then 18 months later, only 316, which is a gigantic behavioral change. I mean, it's very impressive. Now, they didn't see that type of change at every camera installed, but they saw, I think that they saw fewer citations at at a rate of 15% in some, a small increase, maybe for the better, to 61% across the city. So they look like they're working. I mean, when I drive to DC, I know where some of the cameras are. Waze will alert you to some of them as well. And generally, people are, slowing down in those areas. I guess the critical point for traffic cameras like this would be when there's so many of them that people who are speeding just give up, throw their hands in there and say, okay, I'm gonna stick to the limit, which maybe that critical mass can be reached and we could see some real, gains in safety in cities and states that deploy technology like this.
No, in New York, what a lot of people do is they put on fake license plates or they obstruct their license plate somehow. Don't do that. There's actually somebody who goes around Manhattan and photographs people who've done that to their license plate and I guess reports them because the city will pay you money for reporting people who are committing that crime, which I think is great. So,
Well, you might identify with a big problem in DC's enforcement, which is that they can't force people coming into the city from Maryland or Virginia to pay these fines, which really hurts their ability to, affect the behavior of those folks. Because if the fines aren't going to stick and people aren't going to be required to pay them if they simply live in a neighboring state, then it's going to be a problem. And if you've driven in DC, you know that every other license plate is going to be from Maryland or Virginia.
wait, so I can go to DC this weekend and drag race and I get off scot-free? Fred, what do you want to do this weekend? You want to
Well,
go drag race in DC?
No, I've done that. I've done my time
Hmm.
in DC. I actually
Yeah.
did get a ticket once for being bad there. But it was interesting because it was associated with a red light, and the ticket said that I was decelerating, but not fast enough. So there's actually some intelligence built into these things to determine, uh, I guess as best I can, the motivation and the scofflawness of the person who's doing the violation.
Hmm. Shameful. Hey, speaking of violations, listeners, do you enjoy our relatively new segment called Gaslight Illumination? Wait, you haven't noticed this is a thing? It is. Once a week, we'll each highlight somebody from the auto industry that we think is gaslighting the public. And we'll go ahead and do that. So I'm going to start off this week because this week I'm throwing a curveball. Okay, listeners at home, we send around a group email and we say, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do this one, this one, this one. So this week, my nominee for Gaslight of the Week is Fred Perkins. Because, because for the last all of the Gaslight nominees, I keep choosing the same company, a little company called GM Cruise. But this week, Fred Perkins said he was taking GM Cruise. Not on my watch, buddy.
What a
Okay.
crybaby. Okay, go ahead. You can have Cruise.
Hey, it's my thing. Okay. This is what I'm known for. Okay.
Didn't know that was your jam, but
Yeah,
now I
well,
know.
look, read the reviews of the show on iTunes. It says very informative, except the host is kind of obnoxious. Okay. So that's my jam. Okay. I'm going to be obnoxious here.
All right, fair
So,
enough.
From Cruz's Twitter feed, Houston, we missed you. Today we're resuming driving in Houston, where we'll build on the knowledge collected last year. We'll start with human-driven vehicles and move to supervised autonomous driving with a safety driver behind the wheels in the coming weeks, guided by safety. Do I have to add anything to this? Does it need
I
more
think
context?
I think most of our listeners by now understand your animosity towards Cruz.
Well, yeah. And people thought it was just Kyle associated. No, it's just so dumb. All right, Fred, since I called, oh, I'm sorry, go on.
Now, I was going to say, I'm surprised you haven't personalized it yet. Ever since Kyle left, you've never gone ad hominem on their
Well,
management.
It's not going to
Lazy.
be,
You're just lazy, Anthony. Come on.
they're not going to stick around. They've already spent 8 billion. I think we covered this last week. They hope to generate hundreds of million in revenue in a few years. I can do basic math. That's still 8 billion in the hole. Like it's at some point GM management's going to go, wait a second. If I thought I carried the 3. Oh, we're just setting money on fire. Let's sell more Hummers. So with that, Fred Perkins, please take away your nominee.
All right. This week's nominee is Chris Urmson, who is the CEO of a company called Aurora. Aurora's kind of been flying under the radar because they're concentrating on heavy trucks and they don't get the same kind of coverage that we get. So I've looked up some of their information on safety, and there's a lot of it out there. If you go to their safety website, you'll see a note by Chris that says, as you'll see in this safety assessment, our 5 pillars, proficiency, fail safety, continuous improvement, resilience, and trustworthiness underlie our safety approach. Now that's interesting because they talk about continuous improvement, but they haven't updated any of their website safety information since 2022. It seems like a long interval between declaring your continuous improvement process and actually doing something. They published a voluntary safety self-assessment as required, or not as required, but as hopefully suggested by our friends at NHTSA, again in 2022. So apparently no update since then. But they also go on to say, or he goes on to say, Aurora will not launch our autonomous trucking product until our safety case for our initial driverless operations is complete. Well, they launched that in 2023, and I haven't seen any updates that says their safety self-assessment is, or their safety case is complete. Now, safety case is a process for validating the requirements, and they're having a discussion about what your requirements are, and saying, well, this is what it takes to actually achieve those requirements. So Aurora has not published any requirements, so we have no idea what it is they're trying to do. So how do you then know that the safety case is complete? Well, so I went to the safety case and they published it, which is good. That was a great thing to do. It starts a conversation. And anybody can do that. It's on their website. But if you go into the safety case, well, their whole approach for safety leans heavily on the safety case analysis. But again, no requirements are there. So how do you know exactly what it is they're analyzing in their safety case? There are the framework might be useful to validate this requirement satisfaction or validation, but absent the requirements, there's no way to tell if the requirements are adequate or if the requirements are satisfied. Now, if you go to that safety case, all the entries are qualitative, so they're not reviewable in any meaningful way. What does that mean? Well, a qualitative requirement or a qualitative appraisal of a car would say, you're going to have enough wheels to keep it off the ground. That's qualitative. A quantitative approach would be to say, you're going to have 4 wheels, and they're going to be more or less at the corners of the vehicle to keep it off the ground. So that's the difference between qualitative and quantitative. One is a wish list. The other is a specific requirement that you can actually validate. Nothing in their safety case analysis is quantitative. It's all qualitative. So basically, it's all a wish list. They talk about, and they go in to talk about fault tolerant, and they say that fault tolerance is an important part of what they do. Well, that's great. But then they never go on to say, how many faults, or how many faults can you tolerate? Is it 1 safety critical fault? Is it 6 non-safety critical faults? Is it 2 safety critical faults? Now, most electronics controls for jet aircraft are more or less quad fault tolerant. In other words, you can have 4 faults and you can still operate successfully. But let's say that you have 2 fault tolerance that you've designed into your vehicle. Well, that's good because they talk about redundancy. And redundancy implies that you have 2 fault tolerance. They talk about having 2 computers in each vehicle, and that's a fault tolerance. So that's great. But what do you do then if one fails? Well, one of them sends out a message that says 3, and the other one sends out a message that says 4. Well, how do you know which is right?
4 is right. Bigger number.
Put 2 thermometers in your house, and you'll see one of them has a reading of 68 degrees. The other has a reading of 70 degrees. There's an old saying in experimental engineering that says if you have one thermocouple, you know what the temperature is. If you have two, you no longer know what the temperature is. So really for vehicles and things that are consequential for human life, you should probably go with three fault tolerance so that you've got some way of deciding which, if one fails, is the actual correct number. You can have a vote there. Anyway, it's complex as I've put it through, but it's, again, going to their fault tolerance and their safety case analysis, there's really nothing in there that's quantitative. Is it complete? Well, they said this is going to be complete before they go out on the road. There's nothing in there about load safety. For example, if they have a heavy truck, which is what they're doing, Class 8 trucks, well, what do they do about their load safety? If there's a fire behind the cab in the truck, what do? If their load shifts, what do? If they start dropping things out the back of the truck, what do? I don't know the answer to that, but it's not included in their safety case analysis. It seems that probably ought to be. What if the car is running out of control? What if the truck is running out of control? How are the police going to stop it? Not addressed. How are the state police going to do a safety inspection on the side of the road, which is what they do for heavy trucks, right? They'll frequently stop the trucks, check the log, look at the vehicle, do an inspection. Well, a lot of the safety critical features in these trucks are not accessible by visual inspection, right? They're buried in the computer. So how is the state police officer or the highway patrol going to know whether or not this truck is safe to have on the road?
What will they do when, because 18-wheelers, you see a lot on the road where they blow tread. No, the tread flies off the tires. These guys are not going to be using some new special tire, right? So what are these?
Do what, Anthony? I'm sorry.
What do they do when these 18-wheelers will eventually blow tread, like the tread flies off one of the tires?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a good question. I don't know. I didn't see it in the safety case analysis. Well, it's just, it has some vague words about monitoring the truck itself. And Aurora says that their software is agnostic with respect to the hardware on which it's hosted. So they say it's good for anything. And they're working with Volvo in particular. So I don't know. It's not addressed in their literature. Good question, though. So then I did.
I'm sorry, one real quick. So wait, they're claiming that their software is agnostic to the hardware and will work with anything. So just looking at the history of software, no,
Yeah.
sorry, no. But anyway, continue.
Claim. Yeah. All right. So the final element here is that I went to our consumers' AV Bill of Rights, and I said, okay, let's compare what they're talking about with our consumer AV Bill of Rights. And there are 12 items in there. So what's your guess as to how many of those are fully satisfied by the documentation available for Aurora?
I'm going to say 2.
You're going to say 2. Michael, what's your guess?
I'll say 4, just to be generous.
4. Well, how about 0?
I knew it. So I win. I'm closer to 0.
Now, maybe there's a couple of partials. So, there's no discussion of authentication of the commands, but they do talk about cybersecurity. So maybe there's partial credit there. And, it goes on and on and on. But basically, there's no evidence of insurance for the people who might be involved in a crash with these. There's no evidence of duty of care, right? There's no evidence of any programmatic issues. So apparently they're throwing that over the transom to the truck manufacturer itself rather than addressing that in the software. So that's an interesting gap between what Aurora is proposing in terms of safety and what the OEM is actually able to deliver in terms of safety, because there's a lot of consequential issues, as Anthony just pointed out, about how the software is implemented and actually put in the truck. So I could go on and on and on, but if anybody's interested in exploring this bankruptcy in more detail, send us a note, contact@autosafety.org, and I'll be happy to send you a graphic that describes their bankruptcy of their safety system on a balance sheet, which looks a lot like a financial balance sheet. Um, we're helpfully going to send this to Aurora as well, but we're going to wait for their request for that. So my nominee is Chris Urmson from Aurora Safety, who actually is offering a master class in gaslight for AV operation.
All right, it's a pretty good nominee. Michael Brooks, can you beat it?
All right. My nominee is a company that we don't talk too much about here because they don't sell a lot of cars, but it is, and I wanted to nominate them because they have filed for bankruptcy. I may not get another chance, and that is Fisker Automotive. They are basically an electric vehicle company run by a guy named Fisker. You always got to wonder about those folks who name their companies after themselves.
Ford.
But they have made a lot of claims over the years. They've kind of got they got a Tesla Elon similar playbook where they say a lot of things and they attract investors, but they don't really quite get there. So a couple of examples of that, in 2018, they claimed that they had solved the holy grails of EV production. That is the creation of a solid state battery. That's something we've talked about a lot on here. They're lighter, they don't catch on fire. There's a lot of advantages to them. Well, a few years later, Fisker came out and said, "Oh, yeah, we didn't quite do that." But even better than that, in 2021, they claimed that they had gotten together with the Vatican to create an electric Pope mobile, which
Wow.
was also a lie. It's a company that has been built on these forward-looking statements that have no basis in reality. And for that, before they head off into the sunset, I just want to nominate Fisker for Gaslight Illumination of the Week.
That is good. Wait, so they claim they work with the Vatican to make an electric Pope mobile, and the Vatican's like, who dis, new phone?
Yeah, pretty much.
Wow. I mean, I get these tech lunatics being like, I put it on my vision board, so it must be true. But then to be like, hey, the Vatican said this, like, I mean, choose a different target. Okay.
Well, was that part of the Pope inviting comedians to come and talk to him? Because it sounds pretty
Hi-oh.
funny.
Oh boy. Hey listeners, have you donated yet? Have you given us 5 stars? Have you told all your friends? Have you? Have you? Have you? Well, if not, you can keep listening, especially if you're driving down the road. Don't donate or tell all your friends while you're driving down the road. Unless your friends are sitting right next to you, put down the phone, make sure you have your seatbelt on, and hopefully your airbag has not been recalled. Moving on to China. Got a lot of articles about China and their self-driving cars. And no, as red-blooded Americans, we cannot let China beat us, right? We must stop. They must have more advanced, different robo-taxi technology than we do. No, what China has that we don't have is called repression of the free press, okay? Because they've been running these robo-taxis really no different than what's roaming through San Francisco and Phoenix. And the main difference is,
Oh, I mean, I think you could suggest that they're doing it even worse based on the numbers we're seeing. But
well, the main difference is that they're like, hey, if you try to report about how these things are bad and dangerous, we're gonna come and put you in a little prison camp. So we've got a couple articles. The New York Times is a good one. It says a fleet of 500 taxis navigated by computers, often with no safety drivers in them for backup, buzz around. The company that operates them, the tech giant Baidu, said last month that it would add a further 1,000 of the so-called robot taxis in Wuhan. This is they're basically just going. They're basically saying, "Hey, Kyle, can you run our robo taxi program?" And so they're really taking his playbook and just letting this loose everywhere. And there's nothing you can do about it.
Well, Michael, I've got a question. Is it legal for Waymo to import software from China that might help them avoid running into telephone poles? Have the Chinese solved that problem?
Yeah, currently, I think it would be legal unless it falls under one of the recent executive orders around that. But I don't see them doing that. I think the odds of that technology being stolen from Waymo servers and offloaded into China is probably a lot better.
Hmm. Well, that was meant to be very funny, but it fell flat. But I just want everybody to know humor is difficult.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Stick
Well,
to your lane.
apparently, what else is difficult is getting your story out if your family's been killed by an autonomous vehicle and you live in China, because they will take it down off of your social media. They will prevent the news media from reporting on it. And the government is completely involved in covering up when autonomous vehicles have crashes in China. So, the article cites four fatalities that we've heard of coming out of China involving autonomous vehicles. Who knows how many more there are? In the United States, we've had a limited number. There was one fatality in Arizona, and we obviously have talked about the severe injuries that were incurred by the pedestrian in the cruise incident in San Francisco. So, the United States, it already has a better record on AV safety than China, and we simply do not know how bad China really is, and we may never know. So it's easy to push an immature technology that threatens public safety in a country like that. It's not as easy here, and I don't think anyone, or a very small percentage of Americans at most, would be willing to accept that type of regime to allow for the mass production and deployment of technology like this.
So it's other New York Times article that Michael's kind of referencing there. It talks about this RoboTaxi in China, the IISH M7 Plus, where it catches on fire and unfortunately kills two passengers. A woman posted a video of this online, and then all of her postings were removed just magically. And state-run national media refrained from covering the crash for 9 days after it happened. Then they posted a statement from Aido Car that disavowed responsibility. The statement said that the car's automated braking system had been designed for speeds up to 53 miles an hour, but the car was going 71 when it hit the back of a road maintenance vehicle. So we didn't do it. Our self-driving car went rogue and drove itself above its safety threshold. Is that their argument? It's
Well, yeah,
bizarre.
but it kind of runs counter to the whole idea that the AVs never speed, they never, they never hallucinate, they never do all that sort of stuff. Apparently they do.
So why are some people in the United States afraid that China's going to win this? And what do they win
I don't
exactly?
know. I mean, that's my biggest question here is there's just this huge, and we're going to see more and more of this over the summer as we reach Tesla's August 8th RoboTaxi release date. I mean, I'm still struggling to figure out why people think that this is such a huge market and something that Americans are just going to gravitate towards immediately and start hopping in robo taxis all over America. They're only operating in places where it's easy for them to operate now. I foresee a lot of problems in other environments where they're going to be need to operate to make a profit. And I don't know. I think all of us have continually struggled as we've talked about autonomous vehicles on this podcast for a couple of years now, as to what exactly a robotaxi brings. How does it improve our lives? Why would we? What's better about a robotaxi than an Uber driver? And at this point, I still don't have an answer for that question.
Diet.
Well, if you let the Chinese in with self-driving cars, the next thing you know, they're going to bring high-speed, low-cost, fuel-efficient trains.
Hey,
And
we
we
can't
can't
have
let
that.
that happen.
No, I'm on board. Yeah, yeah. Let's nip this in the bud, okay? Because that will affect our self-driving car industry, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
It's a huge danger. And so far, the government's been protecting us from the danger of the high-speed trains.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Good. Good. That's as confusing as intersections. That's right. I'm jumping to a new subject here. Last week, it was one of my potential nominees for Gaslight Illumination, the intersection. Get rid of them, okay? Don't need them. Don't need to go anywhere, okay? There's an article in the Wall Street Journal talking about how left turns are dangerous, and part of it's because of the intersection. It's very confusing. Quoting from the article, in 2022, according to NHTSA, about 44% of all traffic crashes reported to police involved an intersection, about 2.6 million of the 5.9 million crashes. And nearly a third of those crashes at intersections, about 800,000, involved a vehicle turning left. Now, so you come to an intersection and you got an option. You can go forward. That's a third of your options right there. You make a right turn. That's another third. Or you can make a left turn. That's another third. So, sounds about right that a third of the crashes at intersections would be involving a left turn. Or am I missing something?
Well, actually, as I read it, actually something less than a third of the crashes are associated with left-hand turns.
Oh, you're right. It's nearly a third. You're absolutely right. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so it suggested that the left-hand turns are actually somewhat safer, but it's an interesting article, and I don't know. I don't know. It's a mystery to me.
I wonder, there are a lot of intersections where there are cars going straight through, say 90% of the vehicles going through that intersection are just going straight, not taking a left turn or a right turn. And then maybe the left turns and the right turns add up to that last 10%. And so for 33% of the crashes to be related to the left turn is actually significant. Am I reading that wrong? I mean, I'm just assuming that drivers, that at any given intersection, drivers are going to be going straight through that intersection more often than turning.
Could be. I think you need
yeah.
to have a lot of statistics and a lot of road observations to validate that assumption. I don't know. I haven't read the study itself, so I'm only.
But even then, I think where we've seen cities banning left turns, it's even if they are less safe than others, but that's not really the motivation behind cities banning them. You'd see most cities do so during rush hours. I know that on my drive to DC through Old Town Alexandria, Virginia, there are time restrictions. If you're going north towards the city, then between 7 and 9 a.m., you can't turn left in certain intersections, and coming in reverse from 4 to 6 p.m., the same thing. That's not really a safety measure, although I guess it could be, but it's really a matter of speeding traffic up because you don't have an entire lane of traffic blocked while one driver waits to make a left turn.
Right.
And so that's really why we've seen it in cities. I think Philadelphia is a city I've driven in that has a lot of one-way streets to kind of get away from this. And there's a lot of ways to do this, whether it's during rush hours or during certain times when there are going to be more vehicles on the road, or when, the times you see more fatalities or injuries or crashes related to left turns. Maybe there's a way to do this so that it's both protective but also not confusing, because I know it can get confusing when you've got, you can turn left here certain hours of the day and not other hours of the day. But it's interesting. Another thing that's interesting that wasn't included in the article is that J. Edgar Hoover actually banned his drivers from making left turns in the late 50s because he had been involved in a left turn crash. So,
well, he didn't like anything that tended left.
Yeah,
that's well known.
That's a different thing.
There we go.
But I think the underlying assumption in this article is that slower traffic in cities is bad. But we've seen over and over again that slower traffic in cities is the most important parameter behind safer highways, right? So I'm not sure that the logic behind this article actually holds water in terms of public safety.
Listeners, what do you think? What's your experience of making left turns? Because there's an intersection just outside my window here, and I got to tell you, from that intersection alone, left turn should be banned. It's mainly, well, you can't make a right turn at this intersection, and the people making these unprotected left turns, they're just like, I bet I can beat the guy coming at me. And the guy coming at you is like, I bet I can beat him. And then they smash and they get on a reality dating show. It's a whole thing. Hey, listeners, have you donated? Okay. No? All right. So maybe what they need is this new product from Alpine. That's right. Alpine. Alpine? Alpine?
It's
It's
spelled
French.
Alpine, but it's
Alpine.
French. So
It's
yeah.
Alpine. I only know them as an F1 company that does really badly this year. So they make a little. They have a new the A290. It's a little sporty kind of I don't know hatchbacky looking thing. And the cool
I
thing
like
about
it.
this, yeah, what it looks like my
It looks pretty
Corolla.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like my little Corolla, but it's French, so it comes with cigarettes. Um, at the heart of from this article in Jalopnik, at the heart of each A290 will be a new coaching function that's designed to teach owners how to get to grips with your vehicle. To do this, the car will use its new telemetrics function to highlight areas you can improve on as a driver. As Alpine explains, Alpine, whatever, ideal for learning at your own pace. This section includes the basic reflexes you need to adapt when driving a sports car, such as tracking, trajectory
Oh,
control, and braking techniques. As you progress, the concepts covered, such as managing drift when lifting off, become more advanced. Oh my God. I
yeah.
do what? No.
Yeah.
Can they geofence
Yeah.
this so it only works on a track?
Well, I mean, look, in principle, I think you could take a system like this and use it for really good things, like driver education, improvement of drivers who make certain mistakes over and over again. If your car is keeping a scorecard on how well you're driving, I would love for cars to have a feature that, takes points away from drivers who seem to feel like they have to be 6 feet from my bumper at all times at 50 miles an hour, right? It would be great if cars could coach us as we drive. However, the Alpine car looks like it is really geared towards training people how to be performance racers or drifters. So I'm not sure if it fits within the good side of the technology that I really am hoping for.
Yeah, I think if they could geo restrict this to racetracks or something like that, all for it. I think it'd be a great little coach for, teenagers learning to drive. Be like, oh, stop sign, stop sign, stop. So I don't have to keep hitting a phantom brake in front of me.
Have you ever driven on the Beltway around Paris?
I've been in a
Yes.
taxi. I didn't do the
In a
driving.
taxi. It scared me to death,
Mm.
actually.
It's actually quite frightening, but
Yeah.
there are three lanes, as I recall, circling the city, and between the middle lane and the left lane, there's an invisible lane that's reserved for motorcyclists. And the motorcyclists crash through that at about 20 miles an hour faster than the prevailing traffic speed, whatever it is. And you'll get a lot of attitude from the motorcycle drivers if you impinge on their invisible lane. So there's a whole different ethos behind French driving than we've experienced here. Just want to
And
throw
yet
that in.
and yet they still have crash and fatality rates that are significantly lower than ours in America.
Yeah, they
I
do.
think you're inspiring a new segment we can do is the dangerous roads around the world. What I thought of immediately was
Oh, there are
the
many.
the road from the airport in Manila to downtown Manila. Like that's a fun road. All of a sudden it's a 5-lane highway. Now it's a 1-lane highway. And there's no indication that this happened. Now it's 3. Now it's 1 again. Now it's 5. Now it's 6. Now you're going the wrong way.
Hey, Michael, will the center pay me to do some experiments and, surveys of some of these roads? There's one between Melbourne and Sydney that I'd really like to investigate.
Yeah, he needs me to
Uh,
supply his water, so I think this would be a good idea.
yeah, that sounds great. We'll get right on that one.
All right. All right. Thanks.
Excellent. Cool. Hey, let's jump into some recalls because we're getting to that time of the hour. How's that sound? That sounds great. Awesome. Good.
Wait,
Hey, wait. Oh
wait.
no, you're waiting on me. What do you what do you want to talk
I
about?
think there was a Dow of Fred
Oh
today.
my God, there's a Dow of
Come
Fred.
on.
Yes. Oh gee, I'm so look. We're flying with time, and this is a good one because we briefly touched on this one in the past.
You've
It's
now entered the
and
Dow
Fred's
of
going to tell
Fred.
us that we're all sitting in our cars wrong. No, that's not. He's going to say it more.
All right,
Positive.
Anthony, have you ever seen the movie Jerry Maguire?
Yes.
There's a
Love Tom
scene
Cruise.
where there's the Jerry's in the front seat and the kid's in the back seat. Do you
Okay.
remember anything that the kid was saying?
No.
Well,
My
one of the
career's
things he said
over.
is a
I don't
human
want to
head
join
weighs nine
Scientology.
pounds.
Oh,
Huh? Human head weighs 9 pounds. Okay. So that's interesting. But that's actually he's referring to the mass. He's not a physicist, so he's referring to the mass in the case of a 1G acceleration, and that's when it weighs 9 pounds. So let me ask you another question. Have you ever seen a sumo wrestler?
yes. They're large.
They're large. So when you're in a crash at 40 miles an hour, based on typical accelerations, you're really looking at about 30 G's acceleration for your head. And 30 G's is like for your head is rather than 9 pounds, is like having a sumo wrestler sitting on your head. Okay, so we're talking 270 pounds. So you can survive that, assuming the sumo wrestler is not going to fart on your head, of course. But uh, you'd have to be very careful about surviving that, right? Because if you twist your head the wrong way with a sumo wrestler sitting on your head, it's going to be bad. So that's what this is really all about. The devices in your car are there for your safety, particularly in the case of crashes. Consumer Reports put out a helpful article called "The Right Way to Sit Behind the Wheel of a Car" with 10 tips here. And in relation to your head, it suggests that you have the headrest gently touching the back of your head, the center of your head, not the top or the bottom, to restrain you in the event of a crash, that you have the seatbelt height properly adjusted, that you, let's see, use your seatbelt anchor properly, that you sit up straight and centered. Your seatbelt should come, of course, you should always use your seatbelt, and it should go across your hips because that's the big, strong bone that's going to keep you from accelerating into the steering wheel, which would be bad. You have to make room for your view so that you've got the seat height adjusted so that you can see properly in front of the vehicle. You got to be able to reach the pedals and to have your hands properly on the wheel at about 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock. It used to be 10 and 2. The problem with that is most vehicles now have an airbag in the middle of the steering wheel. So if you have them at 10 and 2 and you're actually in a crash, it's going to deflect against your hands. They're going to go flying off in who knows what direction. So at 9 and 3, you're going to avoid that impact on your hands. Your wrist should be able to rest your wrist on the top steering wheel. Keep the wheel 10 inches from your chest because you want room for the airbag to expand so that in a crash you contact the airbag and not the wheel itself. And I'm keeping this short, but I must say that if you follow all of Consumer Reports guidelines, it's good. It'll keep you safe in the car. Also, however, if you're tall, as I am, you're going to be in a fetal position the whole time. So I think that you have to address these with some degree of discretion because if I'm 10 inches from the steering wheel, then my hands are basically locked in a claw-like position. So I got to make some adjustments here. But anyway, we'll have this. We'll have the link to this report on our website, and you can refer to that. And please do. There's a lot of good information in there. And that's today's dial.
I love that one because I think we first talked about this maybe I don't know, it was last year, and one of the articles we came across then was to sit in your car and adjust your seat position to press down on the brake fully and make sure that your leg isn't locked because that's what will happen. You want to be a little less than locked because if you're in a crash, you're going to automatically kind of jam your leg forward like that. If you have your leg in a locked position, you're just going to snap the bone. So you want to have a little flex there, if I'm right, if I remember.
Right. Well, the accelerations you're going to experience in a crash are much higher than the accelerations you're going to experience if you're a paratrooper jumping out of a plane with a loaded pack. And if you've ever seen a movie of that you know they hit the ground, their legs are bent, they roll to dissipate some of the energy. You can't really roll in a car, so you really do need to take advantage of the safety devices that are there because they're only there for one reason, and that is to protect you in the event of a crash.
What if I jump out of an airplane and I'm strapped to a sumo wrestler? That would be adorable. Big
Strapped
sumo
to a what?
wrestler
I'm
On
sorry.
top of them.
to a sumo wrestler.
To
You
a
know,
sumo wrestler.
yeah, that'd be funny. Yeah.
That would be
Uh,
fine, but you have some strange interests, Anthony. It's
hey, you were
interesting to learn about you as we go along here.
come on. You're talking about having a sumo wrestler sit on you. That's some different fetish you got going on there. Okay.
Wait, that was a
Look, we're
very apt
going way too
simile. Come
far,
on.
off topic. But 30,
Recalls.
yeah. But no, hold on. Okay, 30 G's. That's how much your head's moving is 30 G's. Like that's insane.
Typically, yeah.
I mean, how do people survive? Just
They
normal
survive
life.
by being strapped into the car and having their safety devices all work. So the 30 Gs it's momentary. It's very fast. So it's more an impulse than a long-term acceleration. So if you snap forward, it's really good to have an airbag there to cushion the landing of your head.
Yeah,
And
but
if you get hit from the behind, you've got the headrest there to absorb the energy and keep your head from snapping back. So you really need to have these safety devices deployed properly in order to avoid injury. In the old days, people laughed about whiplash in the car. Well, that's a real thing. You get bounced around pretty badly when somebody hits you, and that's at legal speeds. Okay, people don't always hit you at legal speeds or from exactly the right direction. So this is very important things to note.
all right, folks, wear your seatbelts, set them up properly. Take a look at this infographic from Consumer Reports. Very cool. If you're, as Fred likes to say, a very tall human, probably adjust more than 10 inches so you don't look like a T-Rex holding the steering wheel. Recalls. Hey, recalls. Hey, we've already talked about this one. Waymo, 672 vehicles. They're recalling the 5th generation automated driving system. And I assume this is over the air. I mean, this is basically about how they crash into a utility pole. So how does NHTSA verify this? Because it's Waymo is the customer and the manufacturer. So does Waymo just say, "Hey, yeah, we fixed it"? Like how does that kind of work? Yeah, just that simple.
That's exactly how it works. Yes, Waymo says we're going to fix it, and they are required to do so.
Do they have to send anything back to NHTSA and be like, "Check, done," or
they will send compliance reports, like it's basically their quarterly, or not a compliance report, but a quarterly report that shows how many of the recalls have been completed. I think in this case, they'll send one quarterly report in about 3 months to NHTSA saying, "Yep, we fixed them all," and that's it.
All right.
Pretty simple. There's not really any verification. I mean, in most recalls, the advantage of a recall like this is you're going to get 100% completion. Whereas in most recalls, we're only looking at people bringing their vehicles in and having them fixed 60% of the time or so at best. So, there are some advantages to one company owning a fleet of vehicles. And when there's a safety defect, that all the vehicles on the road will be corrected.
All right. So we're speculating. I would imagine Waymo is going to run a whole bunch of simulations and say, well, look, we ran all these simulations. Everything's okie dokie. And NHTSA will say, yeah, that's great. You ran a million simulations. Looks good to me. Simulations are doomed to success. They're not an adequate way of validating a software fix on a hazardous vehicle that's going to be used in the public domain. I hope NHTSA does not accept a simulation-based proof of compliance with the safety report. Then Waymo needs to do better.
All right. Our next recall we have is from General Motors, the 2024 to 2025 Chevrolet Corvette. And my favorite part of this is the description of defect. And this is for 13,000 plus cars. The description of safety risk says occupants who travel without a properly functioning seatbelt have an increased risk of injury if the vehicle is involved in a crash. Yeah, no duh. So this is their seatbelt won't retract. What's going on?
It looks like what's happening is when you pull on your seatbelt to pull it out of the pillar on the side of the vehicle, and it won't. Sometimes it just won't move. Have you ever had that experience?
Yeah.
Maybe not in your car, but in a taxi or something else. Basically, the retractor is locking up, and not allowing the seatbelt to be pulled out of to be pulled out at all and used. So they're going to go in and replace all of these retractors on about 13,000 vehicles.
So hey, if you're just living on the cheap and driving a Corvette, time to upgrade to a Maserati, right? Isn't that what we think? All right, last recall. Chrysler, 1 million plus vehicles. Oh my God, the 2022 Ram 1500 pickup. They've made over 1 million of these.
It's more than that. No, it's a lot of different vehicles. It's Rams, it's Jeeps.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Dodges, 500s, Jeep Compass,
yeah.
Jeep Wagoneer, Chrysler Pacificas, Dodge Durangos, Ram ProMasters. Oh my word, there's so much on here. And this is, hey, for you playing the home game, come on. It's been a while since we've done this one. What is it? What is it? If you said rear camera, you'd be correct. They have some vehicles may have been built with radio software that may prevent the rear view camera signal from passing through to the media screen. We're seeing this more and more lately.
Well, this is one of our biggest pet peeves around some of the new electronics in cars, the touch screens and other things, is that you've got radio, a leisure related part of the vehicle interfering with the safety system. And that should not happen. You should have designed the systems to operate independently of one another so that you don't have leisure functions interfering with safety functions. Huge pet peeve of ours. And it's something that manufacturers are going to have to come to grips with as they integrate more electronics into vehicles.
So this is if you have this problem, get it fixed. Do they have a fix in place for this one?
I don't know that they
so.
Totally got the fix ready, but they're going to notify owners in August. So they're taking their time. So we'll see.
Yeah. Is there any mention of collision problems in Piggly Wiggly parking lots? I was wondering how this came to the fore.
And with that, thank you, listeners. That's the end of our show. We'll be back again next week, and we'll look back at what we've learned this week. Wear your seatbelt. Second thing, wear your seatbelt. Third thing, sit correctly in the vehicle so that your seatbelt is as effective as possible. And don't believe the auto industry gaslighting.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
For more information, visit www.autosafety.org.